Hi. Hi, everybody. I think I'm finally on time for something. Haha. I don't think I've had any complications. Well, there is one problem, I guess, that I did. So when I was kind of making the thumbnail image for this, so you guys can see, this thing. I don't know what I was thinking exactly, but I wanted to put me on the left and everything else on the right, but I didn't do that. I put me on the right and whatever. And I think it was because I was thinking about how the image is viewed, and I was like, okay, so it's mirrored. So my right is going to be here, my left is going to be here. And I forgot that it actually flips it so that it's not a mirror image. And so I made a mistake. I'm just going to keep it. I don't think there's any harm in that. I don't know what OVM is. Okay. How's everybody doing? It's been a week. I feel as if, I don't know, there's a lot happens in a week, but also at the same time, it's only been a week, even though it feels like because there's so much stuff, the week is maybe been a month's worth of stuff. This is a good change to a rough day, says John Hogan. I hope so. DK states that the Overton window doesn't exist. It is an anti-working class rhetoric. I'm going to get there. It's not, I'm going to wait a little bit just to let people kind of come in to the room so that they don't, mid-discussion, they can see what's going on. Jake Smith says that I don't know what the Overton window is. I'm going to get to that as well. So we can all stay informed and we all understand what is going on as far as that idea, at least, is concerned. Let's see here. My day has been quite uneventful. But have you been paying attention to what has been happening in Portland with the snatch and grabs? Anybody? That's some crazy shit. There's just a lot. I mean, we have basically federal agencies, if you will, basically kidnapping peaceful protesters, or apparently anyone who's dressed in black. They get kidnapped by these federal guys, these people working on behalf of the federal government. And it just seems like a very short-sighted idea to me on the government's behalf, because I feel like there's a lot of turning ideas, right, or changing in people's, I guess, headspace, if you will. People are starting to see that this type of militarized state is a problem. And it's not just, people on the far left that are viewing this. We have, people that are more in the middle starting to come along and seeing that there are issues regarding policing, regarding protesting, and all of those things. And yet the government has taken it upon themselves to kidnap people, as if, that will definitely mean that people will totally be on your side then, government, right? Steve Alvarez Blues says, "Hi, Andy, great topic, smiley face." Hello, Steve. Can you guys hear me just by any chance? Sometimes there's problems. In fact, I had an issue with the microphone today while I was setting this up. And I don't Mm-hmm. So Jake Smith mentions that when I protested for Tamir, Tamir Rice was the kid who was executed by the cops. I think he was 12 years old. When I protested for Tamir, we were outnumbered by Blue Lives Matter. Us whites had to earn the respect and trust of BLM, Black Lives Matter. And we had to be subservient to the message or we were told to leave. I think that subservient to the message is kind of not really what was going on with that dynamic there. I think that it's more about this is about what's going on within the Black community, what's something that they've been facing forever. And so that they should be the ones that get to speak on this issue first and foremost. And of course, Black people, we all need allies, right? We all need people to help assist us as much as we can. And I think they wanted you to take more of a assistance role as opposed to a leader role, if that makes sense. Okay, Juan Catalan says, Tamir was 12. Killed for having a toy gun. Yes, exactly. In what, 3 seconds? They pulled up and executed him. So he didn't even know what happened. It was a horrible, horrible thing that happened. And the fact that the nation didn't go apeshit then, and it just means to me that there has to be a certain amount of people that get hurt, that die, for anybody to pay attention. And that's aggravating because these things have been happening for a long time and it has not gotten much attention by, I guess, the general public, if you will. It wasn't mainstream, which is exactly what we're talking about today. We're talking about mainstreaming ideas. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is I was thinking about a conversation I had with my mom when Bernie Sanders was still in the race for president. I wasn't sick yet, and so I was on my game during that time. And sorry if you guys heard that. If there's a motorcycle or a car passing by and it was so anyways, I was talking to my mom about politics, and we got to a point where in the conversation I said something to the effect of, society doesn't have to be this way. We can all make the choice to be more egalitarian, something along those lines, to where my mom had a reaction that I didn't expect. She basically said, we're capitalists, and kept saying, we're capitalists, we're capitalists, we're capitalist, as if I'm talking about egalitarianism is something that isn't a mainstream idea. And so I got to thinking as to what was going on with this, because I was going towards, socialism and explaining that a little bit more with her. And I got to thinking, well, we have a society where it is still kind of, to a large proportion of the population, not acceptable to discuss policies and politics outside of a capitalist framework. And you can't even contest it for the most part. Otherwise, you're not going to get elected to public office, more than likely, at least higher, like a federal office. I think there are some, democratic socialists in state legislature, not even state, but local city legislatures and things like that, but definitely not at a federal level, if a state level. And of course, democratic socialists, they don't necessarily oppose capitalism. I was also looking at kind of what defines the left from the right. What is going on here, and where does this idea of neoliberalism fit in this space? It was supposed to be neoliberalism, that is, was supposed to be a bridge between the rugged capitalists on the right and the socialist egalitarians on the left. And it would be the compromise, if you will, between both factions. But as I guess time has told us, as you can probably see, that we aren't really getting much compromises from is not being compromised. The left is not being heard in the United States, as in U.S. society. And it's interesting as to why that would be the case, but that made me start thinking about this concept known as the Overton window. So what is the Overton window exactly, you may ask? The Overton window describes a range of what's accepted by mainstream society at any given time regarding public policies and politics. This is also a term known as, it can also be called the window of discourse. So the idea was first proposed by Joseph Overton. And I guess on an official level, a range of policies politicians can kind of advocate for without appearing too extreme would be what can fit within that Overton window. If anything, what this says to me as far as how to interpret it regarding politicians and discourse with the public is that politicians, and this probably won't shock the vast many of you, but politicians, generally speaking, are not the people who set the trends. They are not leaders. They are designed to follow the herd, which is why this is what makes politicians so vulnerable to corruption too, is because they are easily influenced by what's around them. I think it's been said that Donald Trump, for instance, you want to talk to him last. You want to be the last person to see him and propose whatever idea, because he will go with what the last person says. And again, that's an indicative of somebody who doesn't necessarily follow, they lead. Doesn't necessarily lead, they follow others. They follow what other people tell them, or even tell them what's cool. And so I see a lot of arguments online saying, well, the Overton window is shifted right in the United States, and rightfully so. It's a valid argument. It is, at least on a policy official level. But what does that mean for public discourse? Because I don't know if the Overton window exactly encapsulates how the discourse is about public policy among the general people, among people who are not politicians. And this is because from when you break down polls within the United States by issue, if you just focus on, say, I don't know, healthcare, access to healthcare, and you'll get the majority of the population within the United States supporting something like Medicare for all. The majority of people, which means that our public policy and what our politicians are saying about how Medicare for all, it will be the death of society and all of those things, that propaganda that we're hearing, there is a mismatch between what the public want and even expect versus what politicians are providing. And what's going on here? Why is the Overton window so far, that if it exists, I guess some people believe that it doesn't, but why is it so far shifted to the right regarding the official public policies and things like that? But generally speaking, the country leans left. And which means that the Overton window is not reflecting actually what is actually mainstream. It's reflecting something else. And within the United States, I would argue that there's the mismatch comes about due to various reasons. And the reasons that I could think of, and maybe you guys can include more reasons, is that one, we have a two-party system. We don't have a multi-party system. And I think even in other nations that don't have a two-party system, other members of other parties will caucus to create basically a two-party system. So it can function a lot of the times like a two-party system. When that occurs, you get maybe some portion of the population, about 50%, hopefully, maybe, that believe one thing and their Overton window is in one space. And then you have 50% of the other population where their Overton window and whatever they talk about policy-wise is mainstream in their space. And so the public policy of a nation doesn't necessarily match the overall Overton window. It matches whatever party is in power and their Overton window. But what does that still say about the US? That, again, the majority of the country does actually lean left when you break down issues. I'm trying to think. And so another reasoning why I believe there's a mismatch here between the public and the federal government, for instance, is I would call the United States something like an older voting system. That means that, I guess for me, I would argue that this means that older people are the voters. And so again, their Overton window is going to be in a different place than younger generations who typically get more progressive. And obviously, it's not just as simple as, well, younger people should just vote. That would solve everything. It would to some extent, and public policy may match if younger people were able to vote. And I say were able to, because in this country, in the United States, we do not have a system that provides basically a voting day to assure that the majority of the people are able to at least come in and vote, to be able to take off time from work and to vote. The people that are younger are in the workforce currently. People that are older are not. And so that automatically means that you're going to get older voters, period, because there is not that same opportunity for younger people to vote. Again, another problem that we need to address more than likely, obviously, I would argue that we need to address this. Will it get addressed? I don't know. I think that a lot of people, at least people that I know and I've spoken with in my personal life, don't consider the issue of not having a voting holiday and time off for people to vote. They only say, well, younger people should just vote. And again, they simplify it. It's easier to simplify it. It is a talking point often for people in power too. Younger people's overwhelmingly supported Bernie Sanders in his bid for the presidency, but younger people also were and are in jobs that do not necessarily provide them financial support just to take time off to vote. They, are strapped financially, and so getting that opportunity is a luxury, if you will. And I think that it's really short-sighted that people don't consider that. Another problem here, and this again kind of speaks to what I was just talking about, is voter suppression. Voter suppression is a very real phenomenon. I think if you look at what was the state that recently voted, Kentucky, right? In Kentucky, I think there was one polling station for the uh, major city there with the largest portion of the population in Kentucky. In the largest city, they only had one polling station, and so the line was probably in another county. Um, yeah, Kentucky. It was probably in another county. So again, that is a form of voter suppression, making sure that people, they see that long line, they realize the obstacle that's there, and they decide that the obstacle is too much for what they could do, which is basically press a button for maybe if your candidate wins, which maybe they won't. So you've wasted a lot of time and had to basically navigate that obstacle on a chance. So you can get heavily penalized for something like that. And so voter suppression isn't just as easy as taking people off the rolls. It's essentially putting too many obstacles in the way. And so what is happening here is that we're seeing a older people being basically have the voice, have the country, that get the say, and younger people who are who outnumber older people don't. And so the Overton window here is going to look different. And this is why I've always wondered, why is it that if the country leans left, why is the Overton window in the opposite direction? And KJ Riley, mentions that, if I can show his comment, thank you. I don't know where it went, but I'm out. Too many male voices talking shit. No respect for Andy. I don't know. I haven't been watching the chat, but I do want to make sure that we keep it respectful. Ain't nobody got time to mess with people's bullshit. If you want to go troll another stream, there are larger channels for that. Be my guest. But, we're here to discuss important issues. We're here to discuss things with each other as well. And so if you're an impediment to that, I am going to request that my moderator block whomever is doing that, because I just don't have the time. Alrighty, so where was I? Oh yeah, so the Overton windows shifted right, the country leans left, and it's because of our voting system, essentially. And if we could, basically, I feel as if you want to do the bare minimum of anything, if you want to do the bare minimum as far as, kind of making the country shift to the left a little bit, then you need to work on our voting system and improving that and assuring that more people have access to that process. If you believe in the process to begin with, there's a part of me that, I think I was talking a couple streams ago, that how I've lost faith in the voting system, and for good reason too. And I still haven't been convinced to pick that back up. As far as, I still think that maybe, at least for me, the electoral process is not something that I want or think is effective. But again, it would be if it reflected what is actually mainstream. Because right now we're looking at an Overton window in the United States where it is mainstreamed, based off of public policy alone, to kidnap children from their parents at the border and place them into concentration camps. That is a mainstream thing that has happened. based off of it being public policy in and of itself. Now, the majority of the nation does not approve with that process, did not approve with that process all the time at the time this took place. It's still taking place. But nobody's really talking about it. But that shouldn't be mainstream. That is abhorrent, right? It's horrific that that the United States, on a policy level, are putting children in concentration camps because they're immigrants. Does this make sense to anybody? But no, that's mainstream and acceptable now. And so we're seeing kind of this sizable, not even sizable, we're seeing a complete and utter takeover by the minority. No joke, because these are old ideas, these are old thoughts, and the majority of the people are not on that side. And they have hijacked the US government. These older people are more likely to be very pro-capitalist, and so they will not question a system that is calling itself capitalist, even though it provides a lot of socialism for corporations, right? They will not question that system because, hey, pro-capitalism, and if you ever question it, you're a bad person, you're on the wrong side of whatever. That will be older people, and corporations love that. They don't want to be questioned. They want to pretend as if they actually are job creators. That's, it's good talking points. Again, it's good propaganda, even though, people have lost jobs, even as of recently, thanks to the current pandemic. And policy helped aid that too. I'm going to John Weiss, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, Spinoza, calls at Brief Brain Snacks, go on the Skylar fiction show to quadruple your viewers. Just saying, much love. I don't know what that show is. I don't watch a lot of political shows. If it's a political leaning show, if it's a science show, anything like that. I really have a very limited set of things that I do watch. I read a lot of articles throughout the day as far as politics are concerned and what's going on with public policy. I think it's better to read as opposed to watch, just because if you watch something from like CNN, there's always a thing that they do, and I feel like CNN is particularly bad about this. It's the lack of information that they provide more than anything. Sometimes not saying something is saying something, and they omit a lot of information often. I think there was an example of when, I guess earlier in Donald Trump's presidency, he had met with the Japanese prime minister, and CNN reported, oh my God, look at this idiot Trump who, dumped an entire, fish food, all the fish food he had into the pond of fish. And oh my God, he's such an idiot. Well, the thing is just before he had done it, the prime minister of Japan had done the exact same thing. And so they conveniently omitted that for some reason to make it seem like Donald Trump was an absolute idiot on that front. Guys, there's so many other things you can point to where Donald Trump is an undeniable idiot, and he has done that all to himself, by himself. That was not one of those moments. That moment didn't matter. But hey, I guess it was a great way to get people to not think about policy, but to think about personality, right? And they're very bad about this. And so CNN is pretty bad about that as far as the omission of information. Other channels, let's say like Fox, well, they just lie straight up. They also omit information too, but they tend to just lie straight. And so it's junk. But I will read Fox News articles, believe it or not, because sometimes it's just an interesting concept that was brought up to my attention that I'm like, yeah, I'd like to learn more about this. I see it in the headline here, I'll read it. Often when I read it, there's always something you can catch too very easily in my mind as far as what they're going for. And so reading the material also allows me to go and research it elsewhere. And I feel like when I watch, I'm very passive. I don't go and fact check a lot of things. And so I don't know, that's just me. That's just how I do it. But so and so. It goes, I'm trying to catch up on your comments. Jammer says, TV is bad like that. I think that TV is good and bad, for sure. And TV definitely, or at least media-wise, as far as news is concerned, I think that people need to expand their horizons on that front, because I'm not going to willingly watch Fox News, right? I would never do that to myself. I think I'd get too mad. And a lot of the times, maybe I'll passively watch the other things. But again, that's the point of TV. I feel like it is to be passive. And some people use just TV general as a means of escape from your daily lives. And I understand that life is hard. And so we need a break. We do. So back to my discussion of the Overton window. I think that there's something else we can do as far as shifting what is mainstream to the left, so that what is radical is no longer radical, because it was radical. Think about before the George Floyd protest. It was a radical idea to even mention defunding the police, to put those funds into things like social services and mental health training and things like that. That was a radical idea. George Floyd protests occur, and what happens? That is no longer seen as a radical position. It is mainstream. It's a mainstream position at this point. People don't understand why police agencies need so much money while other agencies are sorely defunded, when they could be funded, while they could use mental health experts that would, go in when somebody is clearly having a mental health or a mental breakdown. That should not be a job for the police to even touch. That needs a mental health professional. Police are not that. And of course, it's no surprise. People die sometimes when the police get involved in that. That's why there's that thing called suicide by cop. People die with that. And so that in and of itself is good justification to even defund the police in that regard, just to prevent people from committing suicide by cop, if you will. So that's important. So you have active protests occurring, but there's something a little bit more subtle that I think we can all do to help shift the conversation left. And that is basically do what I'm doing right now, is to talk to people about what you think society should be like. The thing about society and politics that I have to remind people is that Everything is political, from the air we breathe, the air quality, from the food that we eat. Politicians have touched that. Politicians have decided, what it is we get to eat, and what type of deadly toxins in your food supply is acceptable, and all of those things. A politician has touched it. It is political. There is no reason to not talk about politics with your friends, with family members. There's no reason, because everything is political. And the more we find ourselves in the health world that is known as a police state, that actually we have, but the more that actually becomes more of a thing, maybe even martial law. Well, politics is completely, absolutely unavoidable at that point. And so we can start helping shift that conversation by simply talking to people, because some of us aren't capable of going out there and hitting the pavement and going on the street and actually doing protests, being in, authorities' faces. Some of us just cannot do that, whether it's because, you have an employer that will fire you for doing that, and you basically can't, in our society, you can't live without a job. And so if you get fired, you could die, essentially. That is somebody who cannot go out there in the streets, in my mind. Maybe you have a medical condition like I do, and that causes you to be unable to basically have enough energy to do that. See, if I were to get arrested doing something like that, I don't have a guarantee that I will have access to my medications. And that's a serious thought to consider, let alone with the pandemic that's around. If you have a pre-existing condition, you are more vulnerable to having serious complications with that. And so some of us just cannot do that. But what we can do is talk. I am not a big talker, but I will talk your ear off about politics if given the opportunity, because I feel like there are so many things that need to change in society. It all comes down with a choice. We have accepted the choices that are being made for us, supposedly on our behalf, but maybe not really on our behalf. We've accepted that condition. And so I try to convince people that we actually don't have to accept that. We can actually, wake up tomorrow, and if we as a collective decided, you know what, fuck monetary systems, we're done with it. We are no longer going to exchange goods and services for money, which is something we made up, right? We are going to go to a different system. We could do that. We can do that as a group if we get together to do it. But I have to convince enough people, right, to kind of get on board with that idea. We need to mainstream it if that's your goal. And that's my goal, because we made up money and there's no point of it. There's really no point. If you think about it, it is ridiculous that our lives are dictated by an imaginary concept. That, you know what, this little stupid spinner thing, I could determine that this has value. It is now money. I will exchange it for goods and services, as opposed to whatever currency my country uses. If we as a group decided that, we could do it. And so we need to start mainstreaming our ideas and seriously not holding back either. If you're tired with the conditions that you see around you, that you live in yourself, that you see other people struggling through, we need to start telling people we're tired of it, because things do not get done unless there's enough people to do them. And that is just my belief. And I think that it can start on a very simplistic, low level as an individual who knows people and can talk. If we had, or write, if you prefer to use social media to influence people, to basically talk to people, maybe that's your sole way of talking to people. Well, send out a tweet to family and friends about, your something that you want to see change in society, and see where they're at. And then if you keep reminding them, one thing about influencing people is that you have to stay consistent. So if you start saying, well, instead of abolishing the police, well, I guess I can defund them. Yeah, we should, or no, let me retract that. Maybe not really defund them, but increase funding elsewhere. Well, now you've just changed your position from abolish the police to not really defunding anybody, maybe increasing funds with some other agency, right? And people do not take that position very seriously, to say the least. I wouldn't. I would think that you don't know what you want. But if you say abolish the police, that's what I want. We do not need to have a group of thugs out here for the sake of security, basically going after people for petty offenses that we also determined was an offense. Again, if we, like low-level drug offenses, if we decided tomorrow as a collective that drug offenses were no longer offenses, boom, it's no longer an offense. And cops aren't involved in that anymore. So if you stay on point, people start coming around to that idea. It may take, I know that it's taken years. I have a really good friend who has basically started to radicalize one of his parents. And at least from where they were, they actually used to be conservative too. And he was able to push them. And this was a long time in the making though, but was able to push them left of center at this point. That wouldn't have happened unless he talked to them, or he talked to his parents and said, hey, this is what I want to see in society and this is why, and was consistent with that message. And then guess what those parents do? They go and talk to their friends about it. And then some of those things that they were told were just too far out there, too radical, don't seem that radical anymore because they're starting to hear it constantly. This is something Fox News does, by the way. Something like, I think somebody mentioned in the chat, Tucker, I always get his name wrong. I'm like, what's his name? I tend to mix up the T and the C. So is it Tucker Carlson? I think he stays on message a lot. It's a bad message, but he does stay on message, and he brings his message up constantly. He goes, okay, immigration, hate it. Let's get rid of it. They're the problem. He says this so often, you're going to get sick of it. Well, I was already sick of it from the beginning, but he says this all the time. Automation is a problem. He brings up the problem of automation and job security constantly, to where that starts people thinking, and starts, at least those viewers, they're so heavily influenced by that by now, probably by him just saying it constantly alone. He doesn't have to even have an argument for why he takes those positions. Tucker Carlson. Okay, did I say something else? I'm like, I think I said Tucker Carlson. Johnny Spinoza says, I recently reread by Pathfinder books Leon Trotsky, Fascism and How to Fight It. Yeah, Yeah, we can all go with some literature. If you guys have some good literature recommendations, please let me know. I am interested in kind of diving in or even back in reviewing some things that I've read like years and years and years ago. But sometimes it's so far removed from where you are, what you've read now, that you forget about those books or that literature. So if you guys have any literature recommendations, no matter how often you think people have read it, or if you believe somebody has actually read the material, please recommend it again, because there's no harm in actually rereading anything. So someone also asked me to basically give my opinion as far as where society is basically going. Will society, fall, or will it prosper? Will it continue? Or something along those lines. And I'm kind of weighing of two opinions here. One is I get very hopeless from time to time. I also realize that the United States is very interesting as far as the dynamic with authority. We are not France in the U.S. France are they're known as revolutionaries. I think people in the United States view the French as more as being on the side of the quote unquote revolution. I think that it's a little bit more complicated here as far as how we are going to handle authority, because of the fact that you're talking about a country that was basically founded subjugating people. You're talking about a country that basically said, yeah, everybody's equal except a lot of others. And that, again, was a form, and that was written into the Constitution. So there has always been an element of subjugation in the United States, and subjugation always there's an implied violence there, even if violence is not acted upon. It's implied. Otherwise, the idea is that, well, nobody would be subjugated if there was no threat of violence. And I kind of I can agree to that. There's always some sort of threat of violence. So we have always that is where we started. And it took, well, we're still there, right? We are still having authority figures subjugate people. And this is something that you'll see in the schools and the education system. And I'm a big proponent of education, by the way, so don't get me wrong. But I also see that the current state of education, as far as how it's handled, what is being taught, and how people are expected to, quote unquote, behave appropriately like good students, there's a problem in that, because that teaches you that there's always an authority figure that will penalize you for going out of whatever these quote acceptable bounds are. And sometimes when you're in school, I know that when I was in elementary school, one of those boundaries was stepping out of line, literally stepping out of the line. That shouldn't really be a problem, right? You're a kid. Kids are questioning things. Kids are curious. They want to explore. Stepping out of line should not be an offense. But I remember people getting in trouble for that. I remember this was like when I was in kindergarten. I remember a kid in my class getting paddled for stepping out of line. So again, that threat of violence was there for a behavior that was seen as unacceptable. So we are already taught from a very, very, very young age that there is violence at the end of something if we do not behave in the manner in which we are expected to. And that can go against our very nature of who we are. Some people can't pay attention. Maybe they have ADHD, right? And they're in school and getting yelled at for being all over the place, and they just can't do it. That's not how they were made. And yet our educational system says you're abnormal if you cannot pay attention. Guess what? People generally cannot pay attention. People are not built for school. We aren't built to be in a classroom for 7, 8, 9 hours at a time. We are just not. Our brains will not handle that well. We will not cognitively be able to handle that. We will lose sight of whatever the lesson is from time to time, and that is not being focused, not paying attention. But you better pay attention, otherwise you're going to get paddled or expelled even. Or maybe a resource officer, which is a cop, comes down and, because you stepped out of line, you get forced to the ground and beaten up by a cop. You're a kid in school. And then, to adding insult to injury, the cop goes, "Oh, they were resisting arrest. They weren't even supposed to be arrested in the fucking first place." But now it's, starting that school to prison pipeline, right? So there's a problem in our educational system. And I think that those thoughts are really not being addressed at all by a lot of people. And even educators aren't really thinking outside of behavior and how we naturally are made, how kids are curious and are supposed to be all over the place. I think that paying attention in class, if you are perfectly paying attention, you are quite abnormal. You are not the norm. It is the people that get distracted that are the norm, because of course they'd get distracted. It's boring. And you're a kid who wants to go play, who wants to have fun, who wants to ask questions, and you're told to shut up. That person who is actually minding all of those things is abnormal. But we get that beaten into us from a very early age. Again, by the country that started off our foundation was basically subjugating like a sizable portion of the population, right? And so that's why I think that we in the United States, I could be wrong, and maybe I will be wrong, but I really just don't see many people, unless this idea gets mainstreamed. That's on you guys. But I just don't see people really kind of rising up against the political establishment. And basically, I just don't see a revolution here because of the fact that we are so compliant as a whole. Now, there are some of us that aren't, but I think we're abnormal in that regard. It is more, and it's considered radical to even talk about overthrowing people in power, right? That's a radical idea. I think that should be a mainstreamed idea, because if there's not that threat of being overthrown by the population, then politicians, the people who are in power, have no reason to do anything to help, or have no reason to even listen to you at all, because they're secure. They don't have to worry about retribution. They should be worrying about that. Look at how they've handled the pandemic, by the way. They should be held accountable for killing hundreds of thousands of people, or at least over 100,000 people. I don't know what the numbers are. I know that a couple months ago, it was 100,000 people that died from something that we knew was coming, that was preventable. That ended up being made into a partisan issue. Welcome to death. You're getting others sick. We don't know the long-term consequences of this illness. I know that having had it, I'm still having issues. And it's been 4 months since I first started showing symptoms. So we do not know the long-term effects of this. Yet our politicians, those people in power, are like, you'll be fine. This isn't really a big deal. You'll be fine. When they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They just don't. Why are we listening to them? I, for the life of me, cannot understand why people right now, right this minute, have not demanded, I'm going to say this nicely, demanded that our political, quote unquote, leaders be held accountable for their negligence. It doesn't make sense to me. And that, to me, is indicative of a population that is very compliant, that fears authority. Because I don't want to get my head bashed in. I don't want to go to prison, right? And that is, we know that is a reasonable threat, because over the most stupid, minor, not even violations, maybe you're practicing your First Amendment rights and you're protesting. And yet you get hauled off to prison. For what? For doing something that the Constitution says you get to do. It's ridiculous. I'm going to read some comments here, since I've been complaining for much of, like, I think the last 10 minutes. Okay, so Majufi mentions that we won't have a revolution till they start evicting middle-class people by the millions. I even wonder if we will then, because the Great Depression occurred, people were destitute, right, during that time. There was not a revolution. There was, maybe there was the threat of revolution. I know that socialism became a very popular political philosophy during that time, and maybe that was what the revolution was just mainstreaming the idea of a different political philosophy. And that kind of got wiped away when FDR came in and did a lot of programs that actually did help lift up people, but it was a real big compromise between what was needed at the time and capitalism, and to maintain that system of capitalism. That's what it was. And so even then, there was no revolution, I don't think. There was just the idea of something different. And I personally don't consider that a revolution. And so, I don't know. And the Great Depression, guys, I remember, not that I remember exactly, but I know that my grandparents lived through the Great Depression, and they would hide things. They would hide valuables throughout their house. And they would basically, this is where it comes from, like, you eat your entire meal, or, you get in trouble, you're wasteful, and because food was hard to come by when they grew up during that time. And it lasted. It had a profound effect on an entire generation of people, to where their entire outlook changed, where they modified their behaviors for the rest of their life, as if they were still living to some extent during the Great Depression. Now, during my grandparents are dead, but when they were alive up until their death, they still lived like they were undergoing the Great Depression. So I just, maybe people will start holding political people accountable for their negligence for not putting moratorium on rent and housing. There's a lot of faults here for politicians. They should be held accountable for their actions and inactions. Will they? I don't know. Okay, so Jake Smith, just to reinforce what I was just saying, says that even my dad's letters from World War II talked about how food was wasted. Right. So, yeah, wasting food was a big deal. I'm going to go back here. I usually do read more comments than this, but I have not been, so I apologize. So Juan Catalan, and I'm not sure if you've had your question answered, Juan, but Juan Catalan asks, is there a middle class at this point? It's vanishing every day. We are all either working class or the bourgeoisie at this point. There is a good argument to be made that the middle class doesn't really exist. It has been whittled down so much, but we still retain the kind of idea that we are middle class. So people believe that they're middle class without being middle class. And they may make something like $40,000 a year, but they also live in New York City, right? That certainly would not lead you to a middle class lifestyle if you lived in New York City on $40,000 a year. That is definitely not middle class there. And so it doesn't, middle class, the idea of middle class and how it's classified at a federal level doesn't take into account location. It doesn't take into account often if inflation and the rising costs of food, healthcare, all of those costs are rising, yet wages have sunk. They're not, wages aren't even stagnant. They just have decreased. And it's amazing how much society, I guess, if we wanted to ever believe to live like my parents had the opportunity to live, like a middle class people, if we wanted that lifestyle, we may not see that in our lives. That's where we are at right now, if we allow the trajectory to continue to go this way. But again, if we do not demand if we do not start holding our political leaders accountable, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change on that's big enough, basically. So Johnny Spinoza asks, I'm not sure, but would voting for Eugene Debs be a waste? Would voting for Eugene Debs a waste? Was it a waste outside of Wilson, Taft, and Roosevelt? I mean, if enough people voted for him, it wouldn't have been. I don't subscribe to that idea where if you vote for one person, if you vote maybe third party, you handed a vote to another member of a party. I think I mentioned this in a live stream, maybe not last time, but the time before that, how I think it's quite interesting that at least with people that supported Clinton during the 2016 election, she lost. We all know this. Anybody who voted third party or who abstained from voting, they were told, and they are still told to this day, that basically them voting third party or not voting was basically a vote for Donald Trump. But what do you not hear? I don't hear people on the right making that argument. I don't hear people on the right saying that, oh, if you didn't vote for Donald Trump, you voted for Hillary Clinton. I doubt I will hear, if Donald Trump loses, that if, as a Republican, if you didn't vote for Donald Trump, you you voted for Joe Biden. I don't think I'm going to hear that argument from the right. And so I don't do that with, as far as like, if you vote one way, you're actually voting another way. That's bullshit. We should have our tiny little minuscule voice that we have left in society. This is all we have, is that one thing we can do, is vote, right? If that even works in the first place. That's all we got. And so why would you waste it to go against your principles? If you are not principally morally aligned with somebody like Joe Biden, you are not obligated to vote for Joe Biden. At the same time, if you are not morally aligned with Donald Trump, you don't have to vote for Donald Trump. You can vote third party, you can abstain. That is your business. People may be mad about it, but that is not for them to decide. That is for you to decide. And so I don't think any way you decide to vote is a waste. It's just not, because you at least took the time to consider it. Being into politics, being enmeshed in politics, knowing anything about your politician that you're supporting, or even are not supporting, is tasking. It does take a lot of work to even think about it, to even go like, man, I really hate Donald Trump. I hate Joe Biden too. And then try to figure out where they're similar and where they're different. That's a lot of flipping work, so that you can decide what to do with your vote. I think more people are mindful of this than you are told, because a lot of people, I know that in my personal life, I talk to people and they seem to be informed enough to be able to make a decision about who they're going to vote for and not support. And that's all you need, and that is their business. I don't know. I don't know if that was what you were asking. I don't think it would have been a waste to vote for Eugene Debs. I just don't. Let's see. Let's go through some more comments here. Yeah. Juan Catalan mentions that, I don't know if this was in response to somebody, but Trump shit all over his own base. The poor whites who voted for him are even worse off than before. No working class person, no matter what, is going to get bailed out, not even the white ones. Yes and no. So Trump supporters were by far wealthier than Clinton supporters. This has been, so it's kind of a myth that people think that like poor whites voted for Donald Trump, because on average, I think the average like income was like $70,000 a year for a Trump voter. So I think that per the people that support Donald Trump, he's not doing bad by them. I think that they very much approve of what he's doing, because they weren't on food stamps to begin with. They have good health care, probably. They have a house. They have security. They're good. All they wanted was maybe a bit of a tax break here and there. Maybe they didn't benefit like the billionaires did, but they still benefited. And so I don't think that Trump, in their mind, I don't think that, he's doing wrong by them. On the same token, if you think about the wall that was built by and funded by Trump supporters, they built in, I think, San Antonio, I could be wrong, like a wall, and it was not structurally sound, and it is very vulnerable to collapse. And Donald Trump's response to this wall that was built by his base was, oh, they're just trying to make me look bad. That is shitting on his base right there. Why would you do that? Like that, those people who took the time to try to construct that wall are your biggest supporters. And you just said that because the wall was not sound, they didn't know construction or whatever, they're trying to now make you look bad. No, they were trying to do something that they saw wasn't getting done and support you in that process. That, like, what? I just don't understand. He is so stupid. He's so stupid, guys. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, here. Juan Catalan adds to this. I meant the poor base of his in the South. A lot of farmers and other Southerners that had voted for him thinking he was going to give them things like healthcare, etc. He does have rich supporters. I don't know if they really were under the impression that he would give them healthcare. I think that some people were. But I think they were in the minority because he said at one point, yeah, we need to improve the healthcare. We need to just give everybody healthcare. At the same time, he said, no, we don't need to give anybody healthcare. In fact, we should get rid of our current healthcare that provide, or our current programs, our current social safety nets that provide healthcare to the elderly and to the disabled. We should actually get rid of those. So I don't think anybody was under the impression, or I don't think there was a lot of people that thought that he was going to provide healthcare or provide anything outside of his more consistently hateful rhetoric. The things he has been consistent about saying, he's been trying to do. He's been trying to limit and eliminate immigration altogether. And he continues to get one step closer to getting that goal. So I think that that was what a lot of those poor Southerners who did support him were expecting. They're reactionaries, right? They're reactionaries. They didn't like that there was a black guy in the Oval Office for 8 years, and they wanted somebody in there that would eliminate anything that black man did. And Donald Trump has effectively done that. Outside of, I think he's eliminated pretty much everything except the ACA. And even there, he has eliminated its funding source. Its funding. I think the taxes that were paid if you had to what's it called? You were penalized financially if you didn't get health care. I know somebody knows this. I'm going to wait for it here. But either way, that's gone. And so the ACA is at risk right now of collapsing, essentially. I think that during a pandemic, guys, during a time where people are actually dying from a mysterious illness that people do not know a lot about and getting sick by the millions, the Trump administration has requested that the Supreme Court eliminate everything about the ACA that was actually good. Eliminate the pre-existing conditions thing. Eliminate the no lifetime caps. Eliminate pretty much all of those things that actually did benefit the consumer in this regard. If we were going to have, and we did, and we do, if we're going to have the shitty healthcare system that we have, those were the bare minimum positives that could have come from it. And the Trump administration now has filed with the courts to get rid of those. And I don't know if it's this week or next month as to when the courts will decide this, but that's what they've done in the midst of a pandemic, guys. Smart, right? Smart. Okay, so Jake Smith adds, Amanda, that was a good thing. I don't know. I think you're talking about the individual mandate. That's what it is. Why, Amanda, that was a good thing. Why should young people be forced to subsidize older rich folks and kiss up to the insurance companies? I disagree with that. Now, the insurance companies did benefit from this. There is no doubt that they wanted the more people, the healthier people in their own system, the better. But I will say that older people, a lot of them, one, are on Medicare, right? Or Medicaid, whichever one it's called. So they're already being funded by the taxpayer to begin with. And if we are okay with that, we should be okay with expanding that to all of the elderly. Why not? There is no problem with that. And the individual mandate, that wasn't necessarily put in place to kiss up to older people. That was to help people with pre-existing conditions because their healthcare needs are costly in the American healthcare systems for sure. And insurance companies were reluctant to cover those people with pre-existing conditions. And then sometimes, a lot of the times, they would say, we'll cover you as an individual, your medical needs. We won't cover that pre-existing condition needs, though. And so the individual mandate was designed to support people that couldn't afford healthcare to be in the market. They had to get it by themselves. They didn't get it through their employer. So it was to bolster participation, if you will, and to assure that they were subsidized. The individual mandate went to those subsidies to help people that did not have money afford healthcare. Yeah, I think there was a lot of problems with the previous administration by far. And I think that politicians are very good at manipulating people from both the quote unquote supposed left. I would argue that our left is actually a right wing party. I think the Democratic Party is quite right wing. But that being said, that left, if you want to call it left, and the right political people in political powerful positions will lie to people to maintain power. Power does that to people. I guess it's just an intoxicating thing. And maybe we shouldn't actually have powerful positions anymore. Just a thought. Yeah, Juan Catalan mentions the calls for civility is always for the oppressed, never for the oppressors. I agree. I think that focusing on things such as how your language, right? If you want to call somebody, oh man, that fucker did this, but the this was, oh, that fucker killed George Floyd, right? Murdered him, right? But then somebody goes, oh man, I'm not talking to you because that's uncivil how you've referred to him. There's a problem there. Instead of addressing the substance, you're focusing on the name calling or whatever I had said. You're not focusing on why I said it. That's a problem. And that's part of that civility politics, right? Where, oh, you didn't say that right. Therefore, everything you want or everything you're upset about, all the needs that aren't being met, we're going to totally disregard that. You should ask nicely next time, or you should say it nicely next time. And to that, I say, you can go to hell. All right, guys, I'm going to end. I have streamed for an hour and nearly 20 minutes. I usually just go for an hour. And Yeah, I was wrong with Obama too. I did vote for Obama as well. And I really thought that, yeah, his second term, he'll definitely do at least the public option. I mean, he has nothing's really in his way. He can just do whatever he wants. He's on his second term. He doesn't have to impress anybody, essentially. And boy, was I wrong about that. I was very much wrong. But I agree. I do believe that Bush and Trump are worse. All right, guys, thank you for joining me today. I'm happy that we had this conversation. The point of the conversation now is for you guys to go and talk about all the politics you want with your family and friends, and try to get your ideas and your positions, try to move that into the mainstream, because we need a leftward shift, and desperately. And that starts and that ends in someone's mind, right? That's how things keep going too. It's the minds. Hearts and minds. We want to win those. All right. Thank you guys for watching me, and I hope you guys... Did I end my stream? I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'm planning to have a video available next week. Hopefully, if everything goes well, you will have a regularly scheduled video, and I may still do the live stream because I love talking with you guys. So we'll see. If I don't have a video, I will definitely do a live stream. Alrighty. Have a great weekend.